In the SAC, you take a look about Homestead last year winning the first SAC championship in program history. They obviously graduate a lot of talent. Luke Goody, going to play basketball at Illinois. Yeah. He's going to sit out from football. He was arguably the best quarterback. You can make that argument in the area last year. What do you see as far as the SAC goes? Because in week one, you've got Northrop at Homestead, Northside at Snyder, Carroll at Lures, Wayne at Dwenger, and then Concordia at Southside. Who do you see as the team to beat? Because that's been a big question, I think, now that Homestead has gotten that graduation hit and Luke Goody not playing football.
I think it's Bishop Dwenger to start the season. I think when you look at what they bring back on both sides of the football, playmakers on the offense, defense, some stalwarts up there, particularly that front seven, a lot of guys, a lot of talent, some beef back too. When you look at the landscape of the SAC and you go down and say Snyder lost a lot, a 35-man senior class. Now they're going to replace that with talent, but how long does it take to get those guys accustomed to Friday nights? Carroll, I think, can be there. Homestead lost some pieces, but also brings back guys like Braden Hardwick at running back spot and some real athletes on defense. So
Sean
they
Rice
could be
on the
there.
line.
Yeah. So a lot to like there. But when you look at complete teams on both sides of the ball in terms of proven commodities, it's easy to look at it and say Bishop Dwenger is that team.
How close is Snyder, I guess? Because you mentioned the 35-man senior class. They bring in, hopefully, Ison Robinson. They want him to be eligible for week one and maybe week two.
Yeah.
Obviously, his dad was a Snyder great, IU great, really.
Yeah.
And he brings some power to the team. Dominic Moon is ascending. Our big guy in the trenches.
Yeah. DJ Moore, yeah.
DJ Moore has turned into a guy that's getting offers from Ohio State.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a lot of nice pieces, but John Barnes Jr. at the quarterback position brought a lot of intelligence and experience in running that system. And they've got some other guys to replace. Randy Holtz is a huge hole because he's 330
Yeah,
pounds.
literally and figuratively, for sure, with Holtz. So you lose, a couple of your primary running backs and wide receivers. I feel like if there was a team that could have benefited from a full summer, it would have been Snyder. Because they have so many new guys and new positions, they could, even in a 7-on-7 or camp environment, really get a read on how these guys were looking. But last Saturday, with their scrimmage, was really the first time that you were able to see some of those players in action when it semi-counted in scrimmage. So this is one of the years where I look at Snyder and say, if you're going to beat him, you need to beat him early. Because I think by the end of the season, there'll be vintage Snyder. But maybe in the early portion of the year, we could see some spinning of the wheels, so to speak.
Well, that's one of the things I want to ask about because Northside's got them in week one. Northside's one of those teams that, since Mike Brevard's gotten there, we've wanted them to take that next step, and we've seen them build. This year, it looks like they're going to have Deuce Taylor back for the whole season.
Yeah.
He dealt with some injuries and whatnot last year. So when you take a look at Northside and maybe even Northrop, are those two teams that can ascend to the next level this year? And also, where do you see Carroll and Homestead fitting in that mix? Because you look at Carroll, they bring a ton of guys back, and they bring back the guy who maybe has the highest ceiling in terms of quarterback in the area.
I think it's easy to look at the quarterback position and say Jeff Becker is the best quarterback in the area right now, entering the season. I think you could put Deuce Taylor in that conversation. There's some guys in the NE8 and ACAC, for that matter, with Arnold, too, that you could be thrown into that conversation. But I think Jeff Becker, in terms of his talent, his dual threat ability, just a junior still, so he's going to take that step for a guy that threw for over 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns last year as a sophomore. Playing SAC competition was tremendous. I think Carroll and Homestead are up there in the conversation. Northside is that sexy pick, but you still got to prove it on Friday nights. And I think that's the big question for North. Look, you have a chance on Friday to take on a team that's still finding its identity with a lot of good players. Snyder's still going to be really good. But if you think that you can compete with these teams at the top of the SAC, then you need to go out and beat Snyder on Friday, or at least be very competitive with them. You can't get blown out. And I think that's one of the games to watch in the SAC, because we feel Northside could be that team. But they start off with Snyder, Dwenger, and Carroll first 3 weeks.
Not great.
Not great. All three teams that shut them out last year in the first 3 weeks of the year. So we saw the growth from Northside from week 2 to the season-ending game against Bishop Dwenger, where they were competitive in the sectional. But for a team that's getting a lot of preseason love, right away, you have to prove it.
To me, I mean, I've seen them a couple times. I saw them against Dwenger last year, and Deuce Taylor was running for his life.
Yeah.
And I saw them in the scrimmage against Lures, and Deuce Taylor was running for his life. Like, I haven't seen Deuce get a chance to sit there and pick somebody apart.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see.
Right.
Like, he's got the arm talent, you can tell,
Yeah.
but he's running for his life out there, and Snyder has certainly got the pass rushers and got the defensive line
Yeah.
to make life miserable for an opposing team. So I want to see him get some time and see him pick somebody apart. That's
Yeah.
really what I want to see before I can put them up there.
Right, and we were so impressed with Deuce's ability to escape pressure, but like you said, that's a problem. He has to escape pressure all the time. He has to make guys miss. He's a guy that completed less than 45% of his passes last year. Part of that's on him. Part of that is on the wide receivers. So up front is where you make that jump into a contender in the SAC. As much as we love Deuce Taylor and Jordan Turner and Arion McCarter and some of those guys that they have, it starts up front, and they have a tremendous test against Snyder on Friday.
We haven't touched on Concordia yet. I think, to me, they're kind of the under-the-radar pick because
they always are, right?
Amir Drew's in his 17th season at running back. Brandon Davis is a 24th-year senior. I mean, they have a ton of experience. Hudson's a good defensive player. I mean, they have a little bit everywhere. And I think last year was a good learning experience for some of those guys who are now seniors this year.
It's tough to put Concordia in that conversation at the top of the conference because we know what they have to deal with in terms of playing big teams.
And Manigault, he always says it's all about the linemen. Being a 3A school in the SAC, Kyle Lindsay will say this too at Lures. Do we have enough linemen, and can we stay healthy on the line?
Yeah. So you look at this makeup of this Concordia team, and it has similar makeups to 2016 when they went down and won a state title in terms of returning a productive quarterback, in terms of returning productive skill players. You feel like they have enough talent up front to compete. That back end of the defense is very, very athletic. You mentioned Sam Hudson, a couple other guys. Cam Vanderbash, I think, can be a tremendous player this year. It has the makeup of if they can survive 9 weeks of the SAC, if we're playing that long, you feel this could be a team that can make a run in the postseason. But you have to survive the grind of the SAC relatively healthy before you can get there.
And I like Lures, too. I saw them. Carson Clark, I think, is going to take that next step. He was a sophomore, transferred in from Concordia last year. I like what he brings to the table in his next year. Brody Glenn's a nice receiver. I think they start to put some more pieces together and have a better year than they did last year.
Absolutely, yeah.